For decades, Los Angeles has been the glittering beacon of the American dream, a place where a steady job could translate into a home, a backyard, and a secure future. It was the promised land for the middle class. But that dream is dissolving not just for the struggling, but for the very core of LA's society. Its teachers, nurses, and police officers. By the year 2030, the statistical data paints a sobering picture. LA is rapidly evolving into a city bifurcated into an aristocracy of the ultra-wealthy and a serfdom of the working poor. The median home price in Los Angeles County, which recently hovered near $970,000, demands an income only the top echelons can achieve. The middle class isn't just squeezed, it's being expelled, and their nightmare is a chilling, cautionary tale for the rest of America. The Great Exodus, migration, and the vanishing middle. Los Angeles, and by extension California, is experiencing a phenomenon that defies simple logic. A population decline driven by a massive outflow of residents to other, more affordable states. While the ultra-wealthy continue to flock to the city's most exclusive enclaves, the middle class is being systematically priced out. Since 2010, an astonishing 8.5 million people have moved out of California, with hundreds of thousands leaving each year. These aren't just retirees. They're the nurses, teachers, police officers, and small business owners, the very backbone of the middle class. They're leaving because the math no longer works. The core issue is a radical disconnect between wages and the cost of shelter. For decades, Los Angeles was a sprawling city where middle-class families could buy a starter home. The median home price in Los Angeles County, however, now hovers around $900,000 to over $1 million, a number that is more than double the national average of roughly $361,000. To afford a median-price home in L.A., a buyer would need an annual household income far exceeding the median. The result is a sharp decline in home ownership among middle-income groups. Reports indicate that home ownership rates fell fastest for those earning between $50,000 and $149,000 per year. This is a catastrophic erosion of the traditional wealth-building path for the American middle class. Home equity has historically been the primary means by which average families accumulate generational wealth and financial security. When this path is blocked, the middle class can't just survive. It begins to disintegrate. By 2030, this exodus will have fundamentally reshaped LA's demographic and economic structure, creating a highly bifurcated society of the very rich and the struggling working class. The triad of expense, housing, taxes, and energy. The financial pressure on Angelenos comes from a deadly combination of three major expenses: housing, state taxes, and utilities/energy costs. The housing crisis is well documented, with the city's housing stock being severely undersupplied for decades. Planning policies, restrictive zoning, and long, complex permit processes have stifled the necessary construction of the missing middle. Affordable, multi-family housing options like duplexes and triplexes that serve moderate-income households. The supply that is built often targets the luxury market, further exacerbating the gap. Beyond housing, the financial strain is intensified by California's aggressive tax structure. The state has some of the highest income tax rates in the nation. For an individual whose income breaches a six-figure mark, a significant portion of their hard-earned money is subject to high marginal tax rates. When combined with federal taxes, Social Security, and Medicare, the marginal withholding rate for many middle and upper-middle-class earners can approach or exceed 46%. This leaves significantly less take-home pay to offset the region's high cost of living. Finally, the cost of daily life is disproportionately high. Los Angeles is a car-centric city, meaning higher transportation costs are unavoidable. The price for a gallon of gasoline in California often runs 60% higher than the national average. Furthermore, due to complex regulatory and infrastructure issues, residential electricity rates in California are roughly 30 cents per kilowatt hour, which is about twice the national average. For a middle-class family trying to balance a mortgage or high rent, rising gas and electricity bills are not minor inconveniences. They're the final financial straw that forces a difficult decision: stay and struggle, or leave and thrive elsewhere. This high-cost environment acts as a massive regressive tax, disproportionately harming those on fixed or moderate incomes. The erosion of economic mobility. The traditional promise of LA was not just high wages, but high opportunity. People moved here to climb the economic ladder. For the middle class, this ladder is now crumbling. The soaring cost of living means that even with an above-average salary, the ability to save, invest, and build a financial cushion is nearly impossible. This is the new LA paradox. High salaries that purchase a low quality of life. The latest data reveals that more than 40% of California households lack the financial reserves to meet their basic needs for a few months if their income suddenly drops. The economic vulnerability of the middle class is extreme. This lack of savings and difficulty in securing home equity leads to a dramatic decrease in intergenerational mobility. Parents who cannot afford to buy a home have no equity to pass on to their children, meaning the next generation starts with significant financial handicap. The burden of student loan debt, coupled with the astronomical housing prices, creates a system where the middle-class dream becomes an inherited luxury rather than an earned achievement. Los Angeles is increasingly becoming a city for those who already have wealth, or those who can survive on poverty-level wages supported by public assistance, bypassing the middle tier entirely. The job market itself is also contributing to the polarization. LA's economy is dominated by two sectors: high-paying, high-tech, and entertainment industry jobs that cater to the upper class, and low-wage service jobs that cater to everyone else. The growth in truly solid, mid-level, blue, and white-collar jobs is not keeping pace with the cost of living. For the workers who form the functional spine of a city, the municipal employees, the skilled tradespeople, the essential service providers, their wages are insufficient. The missing middle is not just in housing. It is in the job market, too, leading to a structural crisis where the economic engine is fueled by workers who literally cannot afford to live where they work. The hybrid workforce, the death of the central business district. LA is not just a capital of entertainment. It's a massive technology and professional services hub, particularly in its Silicon Beach corridor. As a city notoriously defined by its horrific commute times, with Angelenos historically losing over 100 hours a year to traffic, the city was uniquely poised to embrace the hybrid and remote work revolution. Studies in LA's tech scene showed that over 70% of companies adopted a remote or hybrid model post-pandemic, leading to an estimated 30% drop in demand for physical office space since 2020. This is the most immediate architectural domino LA pushes onto the rest of America. LA's experience predicts the swift and brutal obsolescence of traditional central business districts, CBDs, across the country. By 2030, the vast, impersonal office towers of major U.S. cities will face a crisis of purpose, with commercial real estate values plummeting and tax revenues, which fund essential city services, drying up. LA's response, involving the difficult and costly conversion of commercial space into residential units, will become the model for cities from Chicago to Dallas. Furthermore, the remote work trend, while beneficial for flexibility and a potential 13% boost in individual productivity, is decentralizing the tax base. This means that wealth is moving from the urban core, where services are taxed, to the suburban and exurban rings, creating a deep fiscal challenge for municipal governments that need funding the most. LA is a live test case for how a major American city can reinvent its physical and financial structure in the post-office tower era. The political and regulatory deadlock. The problems facing LA's middle class are not a matter of simple economics. They are deeply entrenched in political and regulatory failure. For decades, a confluence of local ordinances and state-level regulations has created a perfect storm of supply constraint. Restrictive zoning laws, which prioritize single-family homes and low density, have effectively made it illegal to build enough housing to meet demand in the most desirable areas. This protectionist attitude, often driven by existing homeowners, NIMBYs, not in my backyard, ensures that their property values continue to skyrocket directly at the expense of new, younger, or less wealthy residents. Furthermore, the bureaucratic process for any new development is famously arduous. Developers face years of planning reviews, environmental impact reports, and local opposition, adding time, cost, and risk to every project. These increased costs are inevitably passed on to consumer in the form of higher rents or purchase prices, further pushing housing out of the middle-class range. While the city has made some efforts, such as the transit-oriented communities, TILC, incentive program to encourage affordable housing near transit, the scale of the crisis requires a far more radical overhaul. The city would need to permit over 57,000 new units each year, with 40% dedicated to lower-income households, just begin to resolve the accumulated deficit. The current pace is nowhere near this target. The political will to tackle this issue remains fractured. Any attempt to significantly increase density or streamline the permitting process meets fierce local resistance. This political inertia guarantees that the scarcity of housing, and thus the extreme costs, will persist, ensuring that the downward spiral of the middle class continues its trajectory toward 2030 and beyond. Without bold, coordinated regulatory reform, the city is effectively choosing to prioritize the wealth of its established homeowners over the economic future of its essential workforce. The national warning sign. What happens in Los Angeles rarely stays in Los Angeles. The city has historically been a trendsetter, and in this case, it is offering a grim premonition for the rest of America. The forces driving the LA nightmare, housing supply shortages, wage stagnation relative to cost of living, and over-reliance on a bifurcated job market, are all present, to a lesser degree, in major metropolitan areas across the country. Cities like Seattle, Boston, and Miami are all grappling with their own versions of the affordability crisis. LA's decline serves as an economic canary in the coal mine. It demonstrates what happens when a city's primary economic focus shifts entirely to serving the global elite and neglects the needs of the local middle class. It proves that a strong economy, measured by soaring GDP and tech wealth, can mask a disastrous social and economic reality for the majority of its working residents. By 2030, if current trends hold, LA will be a city where the middle class is not merely struggling, but has functionally disappeared, replaced by a two-tiered society that is economically unstable and socially fragile. The solution is not a simple one, but it starts with a shift in priorities. Cities must aggressively tackle the housing supply issue by preempting local opposition and implementing upzoning reforms on a massive scale. They must also look at targeted tax incentives and regulatory breaks for businesses that provide stable mid-level wages and invest heavily in public services like transit to reduce the secondary cost of living. Los Angeles can serve one final vital purpose, as the most extreme example of an affordability failure, forcing other American cities to act before their own middle-class dreams turn into nightmares of their own. The clock is ticking, and the failure of one of America's greatest cities to provide a decent life for its average citizens should be a wake-up call that the fundamental structure of the modern urban economy is broken. It is a crisis of conscience, policy, and, most urgently, simple arithmetic that can no longer be ignored.